Awesome. Good morning, everyone. This is the first meeting of the Reinvestment Committee for the Social Equity Council. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome everyone. Today's agenda, we're really focusing on making sure we have good understanding, clarity around the Reinvestment Committee's responsibilities, what we're hoping to achieve from this ad hoc committee, how we're thinking about funding allocation and deployment, and really get a work plan in place for us to get cracking. So to kick us off, I'll do a quick roll call. So Andrea Comer. Sorry, Paige, you had that up, so I was just looking at the list of folks from there. Let me just open the agenda real quick. All right. So Andrea is not here. Corey Betts.
Present.
Avery Gaddis.
Here.
Sabira Gordon. Michael Jefferson. Paul Robertson.
Here.
Awesome. So we have quorum. So I'd like to kick us off with a discussion around the sort of goals or purpose of this committee. In my mind, based on the discussion we had within the full council, this committee felt like it needed to exist to help really get a reinvestment plan off the ground, which also included providing the criteria and parameters for investment, providing the guidelines for evaluation of any types of proposals we might have coming in for investment, and making recommendations to the council in terms of how we should deploy funds into the community. I'd like to open it up and hear from other committee members in terms of, roles and responsibilities of this committee. Is there something that's not covered under those three buckets?
Well, John, I think you summed it up nicely.
Okay, great. And sort of coming next from there, as we think about the process we want to take, I'd like for us to also establish sort of the responsibility of the staff. Now thinking about process, there's a few different ideas that folks have reached out to me about in terms of how we might approach the reinvestment piece. I know Andrea is not on the call, but Kyle, would you be able to pull up the sort of draft of process very quickly, please?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure. Is it the plan of action?
That's right.
Document? Yeah, I can share my screen. I need participant screen sharing page, if you could.
Should be all set.
Awesome, thank you. This document.
Sorry, it's still loading up.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, thank you. So to sort of kick us off, a couple of questions that we're addressing right off the bat. First starts with the money. So where's the money coming from? Money is going to be funded through a percentage of the cannabis tax, 60% in fiscal year 24, and ultimately at 75%. Based on the legislation, what can the money be used for? Access to capital, technical assistance, funding for workforce education, and community investments, which is how we see fit. And then how much money is currently available? So currently in this fiscal year, we have a little over $6 million available for use. Funds for fiscal year 24 and 25 will be collected from taxes and will be released once we have a reinvestment plan in place. That said, I would like for us to make sure that we are able to do what we can, have a plan in place, and start our reinvestment activities to spend that $6 million that we currently have in hand before the end of fiscal year 23. Any questions on that?
I do have not a question, but a statement, Madam Chair. I think it's very important that the communities know when they have access to this capital is not based upon cannabis, because I think there may be a disconnect because this is coming from cannabis. So they may think the businesses that they can tap into has to be connected to cannabis. So I think it's very important that we let those communities know that these funds can be for any type of business within the community. So I think that's very important that we share with those communities as well.
I appreciate that point. Any other thoughts? And I think to that point comes sort of the next step on this. Kyle, if you could just scroll down a little bit. We recognize that we have not, there's more clarity that we can provide to our communities and more that we can potentially hear from our communities in terms of what are the gaps, what are the needs, right? We know there's a lot of programs right now in the state, many coming through DECD that are addressing issues in the same communities that we want to be able to support as well. We want to make sure we're not recreating the wheel and we're really filling the gaps that aren't being addressed by existing funding opportunities or investment opportunities. And so to that end, one of the suggestions that had come in was for us to host really community-based listening sessions. It's something that the outreach committee has spoken about doing. I know Sabira was very passionate about making sure that we're hearing from the communities, making sure they understand what this fund is for, what we're doing, and how we want to do it. And so, in my mind, one of the first steps in order to really understand what we should be reinvesting in is to put out a RFP to bring in a third party to run some community conversations for us across the state, both in person as well as virtual, really help explain what this fund is, how the money can be used, and help clarify and distinguish that it does not need to be used for cannabis businesses only. And then where are the opportunities and gaps that we can really dive into. So I'm gonna pause there and get that. And Kyle, we can actually take this off for a minute. But thoughts on that, community conversations, any opposition to those, excitement about those?
Well, I can say I am a little excited to making sure that we do get those communities that have been directly impacted, especially by the war on drugs, that there is opportunity to, assist them in rebuilding their community. So I think that's very important.
Recognizing that, between now and the end of fiscal year 2023, we don't have a whole ton of time, and would we be open to hosting maybe 2 to 3 in person in more regional sort of areas of the state, and then a few webinars so that there is more ease of access for those that cannot attend in person to be able to join any of the virtual ones as well?
I would say, yeah, that would be a plan in terms of looking at Eastern, maybe Central, Western, in terms of breaking it up.
I think that makes sense. So I would like to propose that we, for the first step, we request the staff to draft and put out a RFP to bring on a third party to run these community conversations for us. I would recommend and invite the members of this committee to join in on those conversations where they can, so they're able to hear more of those sort of questions, feedbacks, and areas of interest directly from the committee. And I'd like for those conversations to kind of kick off and happen as quickly as possible so that we have sort of report out, in the next 4 to 6 weeks. So that would be sort of action item 1. I guess I should entertain a motion on that one.
So move.
Second,
Any further discussion? All in favor?
I,
aye.
Opposed? The abstention? Okay, so, Paul, I know January is not on right now. I know, Christina and, Coma are on, so I'd love to get that up and running as soon as possible. We'd follow up on that. And then, any additional support needed, just let us know. So the next piece of it is, as many of you might remember, we also did a study with UConn that we commissioned last year that had some community listing sessions in it as well. I don't think that they just provided us a draft of the finalized study. I don't think this committee has seen it. I have not had a chance to look through it. I'd like to share that out, and I'd like to come to the next meeting with any kind of recommendations or areas that we want to focus in on based on the study for reinvestment. So, Paul, if we could make sure that that study is shared out with the full council, but in particular, especially this committee for our next meeting, so that we have investment opportunities or time to review for investment opportunities on that.
confirmed.
Great. The next 2 things then, once we have those areas of interest, I think there's 2 approaches we can take to actually start reinvesting. One is we have, areas we want to focus on. We go and find the people specific to those areas. But ultimately, we're going to need to put out an RFP with the parameters of here's what we're looking for from a reinvestment perspective. Bring us your ideas, your programs, your proposals, your requests for funds, and have a strict way of saying, okay, here's how we're evaluating it, and here's how we're putting it forward. So in order to do that properly, we need to draft criteria and parameters for investment, so that we can have an RFP that we put out. And then we also need draft guidelines for the evaluation of proposals. My recommendation would be to have the staff, and I know in our budget, we have someone designated for this program. They have not been hired yet, is my understanding, but hopefully we can get that person in place soon. But my recommendation would be that the staff does the first sort of take and review of proposals that come in and scores them, and then forwards them over to this committee for review. This committee then would make a recommendation to the full council on investment opportunities and approve them. Questions, thoughts on that process?
I like that plan. Sounds practical.
Okay,
I do have a question.
yes.
How are we going to treat locales who actively are saturating Connecticut with these moratoriums? I am one council member who does not believe that towns that submit RFPs for this money, who go out of their way to establish these moratorium by local legislative boards, I don't see why they should be at the trough if they don't want to be at the trough. And I have a problem with that. I had a conversation with the mayor of Waterbury about it. In these projections that OPM did years ago, about 2 years ago, for the revenue streams, they were predicated on some jurisdictions participating in the retail sale of adult cannabis, with Waterbury being one of them that they really looked at. The fact that Waterbury had a 1-year moratorium and now a 6-month extension, and they're really, in my opinion, playing games for a lot of reasons. I personally cannot support an RFP out of Waterbury. And I think we have an ability here to really nudge these locales to get in line. I don't really know how I feel about the whole cannabis thing, but I do feel some kind of way that we give people money who openly and actively are not contributing to the revenue stream. That's all, Madam Chairwoman.
I appreciate that comment, and it's, you know, it's something we discussed a lot when this council was established, and had sort of tabled to discuss further once we got to the point of reinvestment. I'd love to hear from others on thoughts on, you know, I don't think legislatively we have any type of requirement to go in one direction or the other, as far as I know, but feel free to correct me if I'm wrong.
And you know, Madam Chairwoman, I'm not opposed to giving jurisdictions that are assisting in this endeavor a more weighted preference. You know, I don't think I'm comfortable outright saying no to a nonprofit organization in Waterbury that wants to put up a playscape. I'm not a prick like that, but I am concerned that there's I mean, Waterbury has about 120,000 people, and they're really not helping out with this. And there's a lot of big areas that are not helping out with this. And it's going to be problematic with some of the projections. And ironically, some of the smaller rural towns like Wyndham, they're getting on board. You know, last night, Bristol just voted for a hybrid establishment in Bristol on a 4-3 vote. So these smaller towns that you wouldn't even think of are like, listen, we want the 3% tax revenue. We want to participate in the reinvestment. But these larger towns and cities like Waterbury, it's kind of concerning. But I don't think I wouldn't want to not give like an area nonprofit from Waterbury any assistance, if that makes sense. But I do think we're in a good position to nudge folks a little bit. That's all.
I appreciate that. Thoughts from other members? Or guests?
Well, since you extended it to guests, yeah, I think these parameters should be developed by the committee, you know, because there's other requirements and things that we should be thinking about. We also have Matt Pugliese on the line, who helped develop the Community Investment Fund, who, you know, it's kind of a similar program that we're trying to stand up here. And they have a whole application process and system for grading and evaluating investment opportunities. So I think we should work in partnership with DECD to kind of put together a program that's rigorous in terms of the application process and ensuring we're, you know, doing our due diligence with taxpayer dollars, but also meaningful in the sense that we're hitting communities who need it most and doing the most, providing the most impact as possible. So there is a template for that at DECD, you know, through our various programs, and we're more than happy to help support.
Okay, great. Matt, I don't know, I mean, if there's anything you want to add, I want to make sure. Thank you for joining us and sharing your experience.
Yeah, no, I mean, not necessarily anything to, you know, to add on. I mean, I'm, you know, happy to talk about our process with Community Investment Fund. And, you know, I had met with Ginny Ray and Jennifer a couple of weeks ago. And I mean, there's a lot of overlap between the reinvestment communities for Social Equity Council and for Community Investment Fund. You know, and I guess, you know, for everybody to kind of think about, you know, one of the things that I spoke about with Ginny Ray and with Jennifer was, you know, a lot of these more community-based organizations, you know, as Avery was talking about, are smaller organizations that don't necessarily have a lot of capacity. And so when you talk about like the vetting of projects, they have great ideas, but they're very early stage in terms of being ready to move forward on something. And Community Investment Fund has a lot, not to, you know, compare, but a lot more funds available each year for these capital projects. And potentially there's a way to think about, you know, the social equity money being used in a way that helps these organizations get projects that are more fully formed and closer to actually breaking ground and moving forward and having the types of outcomes that the council is looking for on the target underserved and impacted population, and then being able to then come to community investment fund to ask for the actual brick and mortar funding to move forward. So that was kind of the way that we talked about it. Happy to talk about anything else as well.
Matt, would you be able to share any sort of documents or structure parameters that you might have around how you think about projects and what you focus in on? I think that might be helpful for us, especially once we get some of the results of these listening sessions, to think about how we're going to draft the parameters for what we're doing.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share, our kind of Word document version of the application, so you can kind of see how we're asking many different questions to try to kind of get as much of a 360-degree view of how communities are thinking about the project impacting the target population. It's not always something that's really easy to draw a straight line to. So, we're kind of trying to assess that in a variety of ways, but happy to share that with you all.
Excellent. Any committee member have any questions for Matt? Okay. So pulling it back to Councilman Gaddis's comments around, how do we want to potentially treat towns that have moratoriums? I personally like the idea of weighted preference for those that don't have it. But any reactions to that, consensus on that?
I'm happy to chime in again. I think it's important for this committee to think about, what municipalities would be eligible, but more importantly, use the listening sessions to find out what the appropriate use of funds would be, and develop kind of those parameters. So when we hear from the community, where is there a need for, resources that they're not currently getting from various state programs or federal programs, and this program can kind of fill in that need. So both in terms of eligible communities, but such as communities that have, a moratorium, or if we want to target DIAs, or, geographically where, people can be eligible to apply, but also, the use of funds, what purpose. So that's just my feedback on where I think we should be focused.
Yep. Councilman Gaddis?
I agree with Kyle. I think the feedback and that whole feedback loop is going to really give us some nuggets to see what the blind spots are and the gaps. And I think for us, I hope that one of the pillars of what we do is to really, really focus on the children, because the battle is always for the hearts and minds of our children. There's children in communities where there's no basketball courts, there's pools that haven't been used or dilapidated, there's blight, and really people talk about the children, but they do it in pockets. And I hope that we have a program that really robustly addresses the needs of our children. That's elementary school children, children in kindergarten, children in high school, whether it's financial wellness, mental health. I really do think there's a good opportunity for us to do meaningful, purposeful work that a lot of other entities are not doing.
Thank you. I'd like to go back to one thing that Kyle mentioned was, putting parameters in that align the reinvestment specifically to DIAs. I'd love to hear thoughts on that one. I mean, to me, that makes sense, right? When we look at the work that we're doing as a social equity council, is heavily sort of guided by what has been established as DIAs. And so I would think that the reinvestment should also be impacting the DIAs and not outside of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And now, as you guys are talking, I'm also thinking about those who have been impacted by substance abuse, and how do we tap into that community? Because, you know, a lot of times when we talk about cannabis, people say that's a gateway to all the other things that happen after that. So making sure that we're definitely talking to those individuals that's working with individuals within the community who are struggling with substance abuse. So I think that should definitely be on the radar as well.
And just so you know, Councilman Betts, a portion of the proceeds from the sale of adult cannabis goes into a substance abuse fund that I believe DPH in conjunction with DCP operate. You're starting to see the billboards around the state about, you know, the cautions about adult cannabis. So there is a bucket of money already being allocated to substance abuse, just to let you know if you didn't know that.
Well, thanks, Councilman Gaddis. Appreciate that.
Other things we should be thinking about, either in terms of parameters or what we're making sure we're doing during the listening sessions.
Along the lines of what Corey was saying is prison reentry. I mean, again, we have programs that deal with people entering into the population and being reacclimated after spending some time behind bars. I don't know how hefty or meaty these programs are, how effective, but you know, a lot of those folks are locked up as a direct result of the so-called war on drugs. And if in our guidelines and what we're looking for as far as the key drivers, I do hope that not prison reentry, but reentering the society is a piece of what we do.
Yes, Matt.
You know, kind of building off that within Community Investment Fund, our process allows for prioritization of projects that have a project labor agreement in place to employ ex-offenders in the project. And so, you know, just pointing that out in terms of, you know, as you're thinking about criteria, if it's something that you want to prioritize. We have seen very few applications that actually have brought forward successful project labor agreements. So, you know, I would maybe just encourage there to be additional thought in terms of how to make that something that's possible for organizations as you're trying to figure it out.
Thank you. Other thoughts on this? Okay. So from a timeline perspective, you know, step one is the community conversations. I will follow up with the staff to ensure that we have a point person on staff that is going to be supporting the RFP. I believe we'll probably have to do it in partnership with DECD, and just get a third party selected for that to help us conduct those listing sessions. I'll also make sure that we are in coordination with the outreach committee. I know Councilman Betts is on the outreach committee. Councilman Gordon was not able to join us today, so I'll make sure to connect with her as well and make sure that we're aligning with some of the things that they have in mind as well from a community outreach perspective. Step two is sorry, was there a
Madam Chair, I do have one question, because when we're doing these listening tours, I think my question would be, how would we really bring focus to what the community really wants if we're having so many different listening tours? How do we bring it to that exactly what they're asking for, to making sure that we bring that to the community? Because you're going to go into the community, they're going to tell you 500 different things, right? So how do we make sure that we focus on what they're really asking for with all the things that they'll be talking about within the communities? I think that's very important.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very great point. You know, I think part of it is the onus is on us to make sure we're being very clear and direct on what these funds can and can't be used for, and where the opportunities are. I think part of what I'd look from this third party to do is come back with a synthesis of these were the key areas that popped up in the listing and in the conversations, where there was interest or needs for investment. And I think, you know, if there's a lot of them, I think we need to then run them against existing programs like the Community Investment Fund and some of the other programs that exist in DC and other state agencies to say, okay, which of these issues are already being supported through other channels, and which ones are not being touched by anyone, right? Because if no one is investing in it, we should really look into that and think about how do we prioritize that. So it will be a little bit of a multi-step process, but you know, I think our goal as a council is to really focus in on those things that aren't being supported by other funds or initiatives within the state.
Okay, thank you.
So step two, everyone on this committee, as well as the full council, should be receiving a draft of the Yukon study, which towards the end of the study includes findings from the listing sections around opportunities for community reinvestment. Again, I'd like to double down on the ask to this committee to review that and come back to our next meeting with any ideas they might have coming out of that report for reinvestment opportunities. Between now and the next meeting, I will work with the staff to draft, based on the feedback I received today from the committee, draft a high level, you know, start to a parameters document for investment purposes. And then we can build off of that. We will need to have that document probably approved by the council, or at least made aware of at the council. So I want to make sure that we start drafting the guidelines and parameters for investment with what we already know. And I think the goal is to be able to conduct the sessions, get the insights and information we need, and launch an RFP for reinvestment. I would say, you know, no later than April, so that we have ample time to review and then disperse funds before the end of the fiscal year. Any
Sounds good.
questions? Okay. So let me check the agenda. I know we had just an update, higher level, just funding and disbursement. Paul, is there anything that you want to add to that?
No.
Okay.
I did, if I could take this moment, Ojo, and just talk about, you know, it's kind of, if you wrapped up the immediate items as well, or do you?
Yep, I think we're wrapped up with this. So any
Okay,
additional items for the order?
Well, I would add to this in terms of the funding and allocation deployment piece of this, which is, you know, the governor's budget recommendation was released last week, and it included the budget that was passed by the SEC. So it's now incumbent upon this committee to develop a reinvestment plan that can be incorporated into the final budget, which will be finalized in early June. So we have about 6.1 million in the current fiscal for reinvestment. And if we expect to pursue, you know, additional dollars in the next biennium, we should at minimum have a plan to utilize all our existing resources. So I'm excited to work with everyone to get this plan off the ground and to provide a meaningful reinvestment to our communities in need. And, you know, Madam Chair, you said earlier, DCD has been in the loan program and will continue to support the SEC in terms of getting this up and standing and running. So I really, again, want to thank everyone for their continued participation. And we will get this reinvestment off the ground, because I believe it is the cornerstone of kind of what we're here to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional items for the good of the order? Now, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, everyone. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day.
Take
Great.
care.
Good.
Bye-bye.